Hey, folks.
Hello.
How's it going?
This will be the interesting week for time zone changes, right? Apparently,
It will be that. It has
has been.
already.
I saw that the U.S. just signed a bill for keeping daylight savings time forever. Something should be fun.
The Senate did. We'll see what House and the White House thinks about it.
Give people a few more minutes then. Hopefully not an entire hour, but I guess that would have gone the other way, right? People would have been in the call an hour early if they had screwed up.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I'm based in Ontario, and they had decided a while back that they were going to scrap daylight savings time, but only when all the neighbors agree. So it's going to be one of those. The US will agree, and then Quebec won't. So then that will be interesting. We'll all get rid of it, except Quebec will do their own thing. So
Fun.
My vote is we just go for the Flat Earth Society, and then we don't need a round planet with time zones.
That's what China did.
Apparently, it's a part of a conspiracy to make people think that Australia exists.
Right, people are trickling in. I posted the meeting notes doc in the chat if you want to sign in. I'm not sure if I'm running this or Dan, but I'll just go ahead. Sorry about last meeting. I know a bunch of folks showed up and there was some discussion. We tried to cancel it. There was consensus in the Slack that people wanted to cancel due to craziness going on. Dan tried to send out a email to the mailing list, but the groups thing that we use for this working group, it's a little bit tricky when you're not a member and several of us have many different email addresses. It gets blocked or it gets put in a queue, and then you don't get any notice back that your email wasn't delivered as expected. So sorry about the last meeting, the cancellation that happened. I think on the agenda today, the first thing is the signing formats discussion continued. And I'm not sure who's driving that today, but it'd be great if you wanted to do a quick recap of what you were all able to discuss in the last meeting.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, hi, Kay.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Good morning from Seattle. It's not raining currently. Now we have a status update. The topic of the signing envelope. So we did have a few folks at the meeting last week, and yeah, we were confused, but it's totally fine. No worries. We kind of did a pre-review of the document with the people who were there, and recognized that we'd need to do it again when we had more folks in attendance. So Kim, for some reason in the chat, I don't see a link to the meeting notes. Am I the only one that's missing that?
Did that show up again?
I think you joined right after it was pasted, that's why.
Oh, okay, sorry, that's why. All right. So I'm just getting that up, and then I'll also open the signing formats document and share that.
And while we get this ready, I expect this is going to be the most of the discussion today. I know the last naming one is quick. I don't know how long the other topic is, Brandon. I assume that's Brandon Lum. Do you know how much time you need for that one? Just so we can make sure to save it at the end. I see you in the call, Brandon. Where would you
Is
go?
my mic working?
Oh yeah, there you are. Now you're here.
All right, I was using the wrong mic. Yeah, I think that's more of like trying to figure out whether there's something we want to collaborate on, whether there's any kind of next steps that we can take a look
Okay.
at. Yeah.
So like 5 minutes, is that enough? 10 minutes? What do you need?
Yeah, I think like 5-10 minutes should be good enough, and then we
Okay.
can take the discussion offline if needed.
All right, so we'll stop with 50 minutes left, and I think we'll be able to cover both of the other items in the last 10 minutes.
Okay. All right, so I dropped a link to the document in the chat. It was also in the notes. Let me share the screen. All right. So let me provide some background and context. This document started as an effort inside of Microsoft, and we've shared it with quite a few other people now, and we're still very much looking for comments. And it started inside of Microsoft as we were looking at what signing envelope do we use for signing our supply chain evidence, and in particular the evidence that's requested by the executive order A014028. So this is a new, new type of content that we're starting to create and wanting to share with others across the industry. It includes things like software bills of materials, but in addition to software bill of materials, other types of content required by the executive order, and in particular now. To satisfy executive order requirements, government agencies will begin requesting a high-level attestation of conformance. This is a lot of detail, so apologies, to this software, Secure Software Development Framework, SSDF. So it's a new type of conformance attestation we'll be providing to government agencies. SBOMs will be another type of content. And as we're starting to provide this type of data, we're looking at how do we sign this. Go ahead.
I think somebody's mic is open, and I think that's the problem.
Oh, okay, it wasn't a question. So as we looked at signing for supply chain content, we also expanded out and thought about other types of digital artifacts, and we wanted to kind of do a full evaluation for supply chain artifacts and other types of digital artifacts sort of going forward. What signing format did we think makes sense across all of these? We do have existing ecosystems that use PKCS7 and other signing envelopes. We aren't expecting to mass migrate a bunch of existing ecosystems onto a new format, but for supply chain data and for any new types of signing going forward, we wanted to give a look at what format would we use. So our process was we got together internally, a bunch of folks, across Microsoft involved, including our IoT folks that work on our IoT devices, folks in our Windows organization, folks that think about container signing, and folks in our product release and signing services organization. So a bunch of folks from across those groups got together. We put together, just to get ourselves aligned internally, we put together a bunch of what we saw as the technical requirements across all of those groups. And then we evaluated a number of formats. And that's what, ultimately that internal discussion led to a document similar to this that we looked at internally. And then but that had some Microsoft details, so we made a public version of it, and that's what you're seeing here. So we went through a number of technical requirements. I think some of you had a chance to read this ahead of time, so I'm not going to go through this in detail. I could just kind of breeze through them. But, you know, as I do, if people have questions about any, feel free to jump in. A key requirement was OS independent. So we wanted, you know, so a key goal for these types of artifacts is that they're exchanged freely and globally, you know, across the industry. So we needed them to be able to be signed and verified on any operating system. Another goal was device reach. So, you know, we think that this type of content, especially things like maybe bills of materials and other supply chain evidence, would need to be validated on low power devices. So we were, you know, specifically looking at formats that were very compact. Another area that we're looking at is cryptographic agility. So we know in the security world that cryptographic algorithms are broken over time and need to be deprecated. So we're looking for a format that allows for deprecation of algorithms. We were looking for versioning of the format, and this, you know, again, is to allow kind of for changes. It's forward thinking to allow for changes in the format over time. Another is authentication of metadata and payload. And some of these areas I'm going to, Brian, can I let you help me with some of these areas as I talk through it? So Brian Krell is an engineer in our product release and signing services. So, and he knows more details in some of these areas. Do you want to just touch on why this is important?
Sure. Sorry, are you talking specifically about just
yeah, authentication of metadata and payload?
Yeah, I think the idea here and one of the requirements that we identified was that there would likely be a need to include additional headers, additional metadata along with the payload. So we wanted a format that was capable of separating those.
Okay, and then authenticated and unauthenticated metadata.
Yeah. So in addition to that, the concept of a counter signature or a receipt, the ability for the signature envelope to carry information that is added potentially after the original signing, but that can be attached to the artifact. So that's where the unauthenticated metadata is valuable.
And here's one where Dan raised a question, so it might be worth stopping and talking through that.
Sure, the first one here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the authenticated and non-authenticated one. Yeah, there are other approaches here where like you just don't put them in the same envelope. And I guess there are pros and cons either way. That's kind of the thought process, I think, when working on Dizzy and some of the other fields. If it's unauthenticated metadata, it doesn't need to go in the same envelope. You can go next to it, I guess, is kind of the conceptual piece.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think there are pros and cons to both. I think one of the principles that we were trying to approach this from on the Microsoft side was not choose a particular path, allow flexibility for either approach or whatever combination of approaches someone wants to use, but not limit by choice of assigning format those options.
Okay. And then trust model flexibility. Brian, I'll let you talk through that as well.
Sure. I mean, I think that this was a conversation definitely that started within Microsoft and people coming from different angles, thinking years down the road, thinking about months down the road, thinking about years in the past, and a lot of investment in X509 PKI hierarchy that is not necessarily easy to change over overnight. And so Also then thinking about, open source communities and open PGP, key only scenarios. There's a lot of stuff out there, and we wanted to provide for the flexibility of without. I think at the very top we just that we call out that an identity model is out of scope for this document, but the trust model flexibility is that identity model, that trust model should not be constrained by the choice of signing format. That we can that different consumers or different publishers of signed artifacts can use different models according to their needs and migrate across models over time.
Yeah, I had a question on that one too. I guess like how it applies to the rest of the document. Is this meant to say that PGP compatibility is required?
I
Because
think
I don't
that
think
one
any of
way
the kind of
to
options actually have that below.
I think that one way to think about it is that, no, I don't think that PGP is support for any particular format. It is a requirement, just like I don't think that X509 or ledger receipt or any of these things are particular requirements. I think what it does imply, it sort of ties back into that authenticated and unauthenticated metadata, that if a format is capable of carrying arbitrary additional information that a verifier can understand in some way, then that provides the opportunity to support some model that some verifier wants to build and support. Whereas a format that does not have the ability to carry any additional information could not, or possibly could not be compatible with a different model. So I think these are examples of things that people might want to use. They're not prescriptive about what must be supported.
For what it's worth, we support PGP with the TC envelopes. So in total, I don't think the flexibility on just having a bunch of optional fields as unauthenticated headers and not really knowing what to expect, and then just essentially reasoning through those in the cozy layers, what will allow this flexibility to exist. As a matter of fact, something I realized after I reviewed this document is that the protocol header on the signature envelope, that's part of the authenticated header, it's actually optional. And on the notary pull request, they mentioned that the reason why that's optional, it's a good idea because that makes it more secure. Whereas all this time I've been saying that the reason why we took it out of the DC envelope is because it was a security liability. So I really don't know what the benefit is of having a bunch of like optional things that you can hash and sign. That's something that, for example, PGP does allow you to do.
I don't know. So I think you're missing the point. The point here is we're saying the signing format needs to allow us to migrate from X509 to potentially something else. And we gave examples.
No, I understand that. You're missing my point.
No, I'm not.
The signing format does not allow you to do this.
But I'm not missing your point. And if there's shortcomings, we need to work with the industry to figure out how we're going to do this, right? And I do not want to say, hey, what we've used for the last 40 years is going to be what we're going to use for the next 40 years. And we need to be able to migrate from one format to another.
Sure, and that is not. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you wanting to do this is a problem, and I understand that point. My point being is that I don't think having the possibility of having optional headers will give you that ability.
You're saying, so the possibility of having optional headers doesn't support trust model flexibility? Just clarify.
Yeah, there's nothing in the cozy design that says, oh, having the chance of sticking an authenticated header will let you move from X509 to something else.
It's not making that statement at all. The unauthenticated header or an optional header might be expiry. Not all content has to have expiry, but if it exists, we would like it to be signed or be included in the signature. That's what the previous thing is. This is more about, hey, we want to be able to flexibility to change. You're conflating the two of them together here. I think when it comes to identity and so forth, when we get further to that, the things that are optional are going to go completely down to zero. right? We're going to be very clear as to how you represent identity. So do not conflate the two of them together.
No, I'm not conflating the two of them. I've been thinking about this problem for many years, and that's part of the reason why I do not believe that you can go process an exploration header if it is there, and then expect to be able to combine mixed scenarios and reason through them on two different layers: the semantic layer of what's inside of the payload and what's outside of the payload, and somehow make some like tight binding between the two. Then again, that's just my decision, and that's just what I put forward as something that you should be concerned about.
Yeah, I think that that is. I have not spent nearly as much time thinking through that some of these as you have, Santiago, and I think that's valid. But I think that the idea, I think the claim is not that separating authenticated metadata from a payload specifically enables a solid trust model story. I think what it says is that there are potential valid trust models that may need this support, that may need the ability to carry authenticated headers in addition to the payload. There may be valid, very secure models that do not require it. However, the signing format, given that some may require it, should be able to support that. I think that's what we're trying to capture.
Okay, sure. If the position is we expect to need this flexibility, but somehow this flexibility cannot be had inside of a payload, then sure. I'm not entirely sure in what scenario that happens, but I guess that may happen.
Do we have an example of that, Brian?
Put me on the spot a little bit here because I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to avoid.
If you don't write off, I just wondered if we had one offhand. So, and if we don't, that's fine.
I think that there's plenty of examples of ways that we do this today. I think you could come up with a counter argument like, oh, you don't have to do it that way today. In fact, it might be better to do it this other way, back to PKCS7 and signed attributes, RFC 3161 counter signatures for when you got an X509 model. So I think a lot of these examples are there. You could absolutely make the argument that there's a better way to do that. But I think what it's acknowledging is that there are ways that are known today and in use today that do require these capabilities.
We have a couple of hands up. I think Mark might have been first. Mark Lodato.
Hi. Sorry.
Oh, you're echoing.
Okay, is that better? Okay, sorry. Is that better now?
Yes.
Sorry, there's two of us in the same room with the thing, which is making.
Okay.
I'm missing the higher level of what the purpose is and what problem you're trying to solve here. This is going into signing artifacts, but it's not explaining why you need to sign them or what exactly you're signing or in what context you're doing that or what problem you're trying to solve or why there needs to be a single one. And so I think a lot of the the decisions, it's hard to say there should be a single signing format in the entire world, but it would help to know for what purpose does there need to be one?
Yeah, so we are, I tried to tee that up. Maybe, I'm not sure if you were on when I first started, or maybe I did a bad job of teeing it up, but a key scenario driving this is the ability to share supply chain evidence across the global ecosystem. So, for example, the sharing of software bills of materials. And another example would be sharing of attestations of executive order conformance. And then in addition to that, we were looking at using the same signing format for things beyond supply chain evidence or supply chain artifacts to other digital artifacts like containers I think that was kind of the other main one that we were looking at.
And
So
to more to your general question, the reason we're signing it is to give some assurance that is the content we're giving you is immutable, and who's stating that it's immutability, right? And that's what we typically do with signed content, either sign an email or whatever. If it's at rest somewhere and it's not signed, it's very hard for us to make that claim. And we settled on signing. Even C2PA is the same thing. To prove that multimedia content has not been faked, they're going to a signing format with Cozy, right?
So
same reason.
So okay, so that's what I had thought this was about, was signing supply chain metadata. But in that case, a lot of the arguments for trusted flexibility in the envelope format don't seem to apply, because you could put them one layer down in the like in the payload. I think that was the comment, if I understood correctly, that Santiago had mentioned, which is that it's not clear why you need to have, for example, lifetime support and arbitrary fields in the, like, kind of the outermost layer.
I don't think the idea is that you must, or we're even recommending that you put that in a separate layer. We're saying that if there is going to be any broader alignment on a format, it shouldn't block you from doing so if that is something that makes sense for you.
Even at the cost of potentially, like, security vulnerabilities and risk that things are implemented incorrectly?
I mean, I think there's a risk that anything is potentially implemented incorrectly. If there is a fundamental security vulnerability with that approach, I mean, I think that's absolutely a conversation worth happening, or worth having. I'm not, I'm not convinced that that is a fundamental flaw. Regardless, there is no way to implement that securely.
Well, the other point is you typically want to know who's supplying you the content before you dare even open up and look at the content. And that's why we typically put the identity of who's making the claim in the envelope, not in the content.
That's ironically the opposite. If you have a bunch of unauthenticated headers and you want to process them,
no.
First verify that the key belongs to the right individual.
A lot of our scenario is unauthenticated content is already self-authenticatable and is potentially a secure receipt or a secure timestamp. It's already something that is independently.
So they're authenticated, unauthenticated headers.
We serializing authenticated content into unauthenticated headers of the other, just as a way to bind the two together and carry them on the network is what some of the thoughts were.
I guess maybe to my, like, the higher level question of my point is, it seems like what the ultimate goal is to define an ecosystem where supply chain metadata could be interchanged and compatible across systems. Looking only at the signing envelope format, I think it's going to be very difficult to get agreement on any one particular format, because we don't have, like, an end-to-end picture. Like, we're not talking about what the payload is and what the schema is, et cetera. It might be valuable to kind of have a bigger picture and do them at the same time, because it seems like some of the arguments around, like, preferences between things don't, like, not everyone has the same picture about what the payload will be and how it'll be used, and having that picture might make it easier to get agreement.
I think we were trying to approach it with having the idea that the payload could be agnostic, or that the system would be agnostic to the payload. So, the payload could be a software bill of materials in SPDX format, or it could be something else.
I mean, I understand having, like, 30 multiple types of payloads that we support, but having particular examples would be helpful, and saying, like, here's how we support transferring SPDX. Here's how we support transferring salsa provenance. Here's where we do cyclone DX.
But Mark,
Again, because absent that,
Mark.
it's kind of difficult.
Mark, so why is this an issue? For email, it's all mine. It's multi-part. You can put anything you want, create a new multi-part type, right? You shouldn't focus it on the content because they're trying to leverage this for multiple scenarios, either from IoT to multimedia to even ours. We're trying to say, hey, what is our requirements for assigning format? And for every permutation we have on assigning format, the security threat model doubles or triples, right? So that's why we're having this discussion. It really does not matter what the content is. In this case, we're talking about what did we have to minimally support from a signing layer point of view as an envelope around the content.
I just think that goes again. I think you're simultaneously arguing that we need to have a single format. Like, I just don't understand if we support kind of any arbitrary payload, why there needs to be a single signing format.
Actually, I already answered that, which is for every permutation we have, the security risks go exponential. We've already seen this for every time we support it. And if you're saying that every single device has to now support 4 different security signing envelopes, from SMIME to Dizzy to Josie to Cozy, those are all super complicated things. And if we can say, hey, here's one where the industry is settling on and it solves a lot of the needs and we can limit the need to support more than one, then I think that is a great goal.
And yeah, another thing to share, part of our thinking is that if we can standardize on a common format, there can still be different profiles of that format. We talk about that later in the document, that can be tailored to specific needs for specific scenarios.
The opposite thing could be said too. If N is more complex, why do we need multiples? If we as this group and others part of this can agree on a flexible standard, then wouldn't that be, because there's less libraries, less complexity because there are fewer formats to validate?
I guess what I'm, and just as a time check, I don't want to take up all the time. I'm saying in the goal of, like, several commenters, and myself included, have brought up that a lot of the requirements are that it's ultra flexible and can support lots of things. We're basically shifting the complexity. Instead of having to support 3 different envelopes, you're supporting one envelope, which is extremely complex and could support arbitrary things.
Actually, we're not. We're trying to say this is what we thought were the minimum requirements that we needed to have to support all the scenarios that we see within Microsoft and Notary and secure supply chain. And that's why we wrote this document to say, here's what we think is the flexibility that people are asking for. And if we can find something that answers these subset, then that's where we want to go.
Okay, and I'll cede the floor to I think the other people have hands up.
I think David, you may have had a hand up next.
Yeah, so my question may be simple here. I haven't had a chance to read this doc yet, but do you discuss somewhere the interrelationships between SigStore and TUF and Intodo? I mean, if you do that, that's all great. But I think that might actually help with some of these other questions too. How does this fit in with other things that people are doing or intending to do?
Yeah, great question. We don't discuss that directly in this document. So TUF and Intodo and SigStore are using the Dizzy signing format, which is one of the formats that we identified here. And so the relationship would be that we'd love to see all of us agree on a signing format and then adopt that. In our analysis, we felt like the DISI format is too constrained for the needs that we identified. And so, underlying this is really can we all come to a common agreement on a format? That would be the ultimate goal. And if we can't, maybe there are multiple formats. It just makes it more complex to exchange data.
Okay, so I think somewhere in here trying to explain the relationship with like SigStore and Tough and Intoto, I think that might give much clarity.
Okay,
Thanks.
good point. Thanks, David.
Actually, I have the counter question. Did we ever in the SigStore documentation explain why we sign it? Right, you're asking us to do the same thing here. So I'm going, to us, it's basically bread and butter that if it's going to be at rest, we need some way to protect it to be immutable. And signing technology solves that question for it. It doesn't really matter the payload, whether it's multimedia content, streaming on the wire, or an SBOM document, really doesn't matter to us. It says, hey, these are the things we've seen. And here's where we spent a lot of time with our security responses and what we thought would have to be flexible, right? That's why we're
Roy, I just put a paper in the chat of an attack against SMIME and OpenPGP abusing the payload to subvert signing and encryption mechanisms. The semantic meaning of what you're signing is a fundamental property of secure systems.
I worked in SMIME for 9 years. I know it intimately. I know all its faults and everything else. And when we started down this road, I asked the question of why not SMIME? And we should be very clear as to why it is not what we want to use. But as a technology, signing to us is a way to protect the content in flight and on storage.
Sure. This is something that I think everybody in this call can agree with.
Yeah, it's
signing is useful.
Well, thank you for the document. I'll go through it, but be aware, I've spent years and years and years on this.
Sure, we're the open source security.
I don't think there's. I think we probably have agreement that signing content is something that we all support. I think what we're discussing here is just about the risks of having a very flexible signing format versus the benefits of the flexibility for resilience to future changes in in signing formats and other resilience.
Yeah, if I could quickly clarify, my comment was absolutely not on the, hey, I don't think we should have cryptographic signing. That was absolutely not.
Right.
It's very much we have other efforts like SigStore that are going on. This is discussing a new, something else that's new, and I'd like to have some idea of how they interrelate. That's all.
So David, we're just at the part of the document where we're listing out what we thought the requirements were. We haven't even talked about what the formats and who solves what. These are the things we thought we needed to cover. So we haven't got past that part. And you're right on the other comment, Santiago. If there's content and there could be confusion, we have to be really crisp as to what is authoritative and what is a failure or an error, and not close those doors. Sorry, it was David that did that. I think we did, or was it Santiago that sent this? But we had to be really clear that if we're going to represent things in 2 places or 3 places, that what is the relationship and what do we think needs to be enforced? Like, can expiry be newer than signing time, right? Or older than signing time, right? Those show you got some malformed problems. And we got into trouble with the internet for trying to allow sloppy content and fix it for the user. And it's been nothing but problems for the MIME world and for HTML for years, right? And we've tried to slowly tighten this up and stop all the magic auto-fixing stuff. And from when it comes to security, that's a failure if we continue to do that.
I totally agree. And this is not to say that I am staunchly opposed to it. I am in favor of playing around and trying things out. I just feel that I need to communicate the parts that worry me.
Mark, your hand is still up. I don't know if that's left over or if you had something new to add. And then I saw another hand up that maybe went down again. Jacques?
Yeah, that was me. I decided to back out based on some of Roy's comments. I will hold my fire.
Okay.
Please voice your, if you have more questions, don't let me railroad you. Just please make it known.
It was less about railroading and more about me derailing the discussion. I think your point that we're still working through the requirements that shaped the assessment reminded me that we're still in the middle of the requirements that shape the assessment.
Okay.
And we're free for comments in this document if you think we need to add more requirements.
Feedback has added clarity to these things. So it's, I mean, that's part of like, I know we want to rush through because there's other agenda items or other topics, but that's the kind of the point is we want to make sure we're getting the right feedback to refine this because it is such a broad impacting decision and discussion.
So on that time topic, we have about 10 minutes left. We're still in the requirements section. What is your, I guess, goal? Where are you hoping to get at the end of this? It's a little like there's feedback here. What's the next step? What would be a successful meeting outcome?
Yeah, great question. So what we wanted to do, and it might take another meeting or so, is to kind of continue walking through requirements and the different formats that we evaluated. Separate from this discussion here, we did have some discussions with Santiago, and Santiago, in the spirit of sort of learning together, kind of coming at this with an open mind, growth mindset, and learning together. Santiago suggested that it could be interesting to modify the In Toto Golang library so that it could include optional support for either DISI or COSI. And so that's something that we've been looking at internally. And I don't have a team signed up exactly to do this yet. We need to think through, who would do it and, what we want to, we're thinking about this is just I'm a little concerned about our doing something that we wouldn't be committed to potentially keeping up in the long term. So I want to make sure we've kind of thought through it. And Santiago, we may want to have some more conversations with you there. And then I noticed that in the Recore project, Dan, you had kind of put a stub in for maybe adding COSI support to Recore as well. And so, maybe in parallel, some next steps would be and it's certainly something that we're looking at maybe investing in, adding some support for COSI, and then people can see it, think about it, and we can continue the discussions. Does that seem like reasonable next steps? Other thoughts?
Yeah, there's success here is the passion and the discussion in this group. Getting you to chime in and putting your comments in here and join the conversation is also success.
Yeah, I will say that I'm happy to work on the support for COSI on In Toto, and I think that'll probably help also David be a little bit more confident that he can picture how this technologies interrelate. And yeah, I think that's a cool next step to have something more tangible to show.
I think there's also there's some concern that because the COSI format is complex, very flexible. There's concern, and rightfully so. I'm going to skip to one of the requirements that we had. We had some concerns about minimizing the errors in implementing libraries, and it's definitely harder to implement libraries when they're more complex. And also there were concerns about minimizing errors that developers might make from lack of information or again, just complexity. And so we had some proposals for addressing those. but that, at first we're just thinking about the requirements. So minimizing error is one, and minimizing library and developer area are both part of the requirements. So I'm hopeful that as we sort of get into approaches for doing those, it might help not minimize, help some of the comfort level for considering an alternative to DISI. So I guess proposed next steps, we at Microsoft, we're going to look at doing some work on the existing OpenSSL projects. And then maybe we can continue this discussion of this document in a future meeting. Does that sound reasonable? Other suggestions?
Brian also mentioned we're trying to detangle what we use for identity out of this document. It's a great discussion to pull off onto a second document. And I agree, we kind of need to have that discussion. But in this document, we're trying to say, hey, we want a migration path. We haven't stated what it is and what our preferences are, because I think community, we have to figure that out. So if you're going to put comments in here, or in some of the comments, Dan, you alluded to, is have you made the decision here on one or the other? We've intentionally tried to say, hey, this is not the right forum for us to answer those questions on identity and which ones fit into this.
Sorry, I think the identity one, if you just want to jump, I clicked the link and there was a reference to something else that had made a choice. So that was just my only question. Trying to understand the implications there. There was was it the profile one? I'm trying to remember now. There was a suggested profile and I clicked that and that had mandated something. So that was my only.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So there was a suggested profile that's part of a kind of an overall, there's a very early draft document that's part of a proposal to create a working group in the IETF to discuss industry standards for supply chain security. So what I would say is the proposal in that very early draft document is cozy, but it's a very early draft document, 0.0 version, and it's part of a very early proposal to create a working group in the IETF.
So I think this was about if I'm guessing right, it's about the decentralized ID comment. Is that the right one you were referring to a second ago? That comment about identity.
You had a comment up above about PGP as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was just trying to understand the implications of these sentences. It said something like, is PGP a requirement? Because then I don't think any of the things below really support that.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah,
I get that. No, so examples, not requirements.
Okay. Yeah, and then below there was a link to like a cozy profile for supply chain, and when I had clicked that link, that thing had also specified decentralized ID for DIDs. I don't remember exactly where in the document that is though.
Yeah, and I think what Kay was saying is that's a draft profile that could be probably at this point interpreted as an example. It's not recommending like, yep, we're going to lock down on exactly this identity approach. I think it's something that we've been thinking through, like, hey, during signing format evaluation, could something like this be done with the format that we are looking at? And certainly open to other ideas, proposals as well. Just a very early draft potential example.
I think if we were to start doing something, we would continue to use X509, and we're asking the community at large, what the heck do we want to move to, right? Do we want to stay on X509? Do we want to go to DID? Is it DID web? Is it DID IAM? Is it DID DNS? There's a whole set of questions that comes out of that. What we use practical today for signing content is still X509, and if we want to make a stepping stone and say, hey, we're going to represent that with a DID wrapper just to give us some flexibility moving forward, maybe that's the only thing we do.
All right, we have 10 minutes left. Jumping over to Brandon Lum.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be quick. Let me share my screen just to show the stuff I want to talk about. So I think there was a discussion around the supply chain catalog that the CNCF created. I know there were some comments from, I think, this working group or another of the working groups that was saying that, maybe this is something that we can collaborate on. I know, to be able to add the resources and make sure this is kept up to date with the correct information. I wanted to kind of revisit that. I know the discussion was probably 3 months ago at this point. So I wanted to check back whether there's interest for us to collaborate on this, and to kind of keep this up to date, whether it lives within the CNCF or as part of an SSF. I don't think we, as a CNCF, we don't have that big opinion about it. It's mainly about, how can we get the most contributions and keeping it up to date.
Hey, Brandon, this is Kim. We've been chatting about something like this in the salsa working group meetings too. And John Speed, one of my coworkers, has started to look into this. So yes, absolutely. It's something that folks are interested in contributing and keeping up to date. There's a salsa group meeting tomorrow if you're able to attend, and we can bring this topic up a bit more there too.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see what I can add that one. If not, I will try to doc an issue that we kind of had to discuss some of these. So yeah, I'll try and make it to that meeting, and if not, we can just follow up on GitHub.
Okay, I can send an intro over too and point you to where folks are chatting.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Just for myself, I do think that collecting data about what's been going on is really valuable, because then we can answer questions like, hey, is this common? Is this not common? Now,
Hey, David, you might want to move your mic up closer to your mouth.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Can you hear me now?
That's not much better.
Not much better. How about now?
Better.
All right. I have a little volume control on my mic, and I sometimes bump it. Okay, so repeat. So I think it's very valuable to have a list, because it helps you answer the question, is this important? Is this not? Have people done it? Is it a common thing? How have they done it? That said, I believe also it might be useful to talk to the Backstabber's Knife Collection folks, because this is a different collection, right?
This collection is only the stuff that's public, and it's just community driven.
Yeah.
I think the Backstabber's Knife Collection folks also have public data, but you can tell me, Santiago, maybe you can tell me more.
Yeah. So there's pretty much 3 data sets. There's the Backstabbers collection, but I really think that we should invite them. And then there's the CNCF one. That's essentially the one that we started in Total Project and donated. And there's a third one that's, I think, John Speed's one. I think he collected that at InQtel. I think it would be ideal if we could merge the 3 of them.
Yeah. I mean, it would be okay to start with, hey, let's put them all in adjacent. But in the long term, if we could, and maybe, I realize that some of them don't cover exactly the same things, but things like the Backstabber's Knife Collection, they only do open source. Fine, have a little check mark. Is this open source? But it would be awesome if we could avoid doing things multiple times.
Yeah, no, I think for research, that would be an amazing tool for everybody to not only design systems, but also to analyze trends and to understand taxonomy.
Right. Right. I mean, the Backstabbers, just as a for instance, they show that every year except the most recent one, the big one was typo squatting, but all of a sudden dependency confusion showed up because new attack, everybody, it's the new thing, everybody hit it, the new vulnerability hotness, I guess. So, but I think that's very valuable in terms of knowing what the attackers are actually doing.
What is the third one that you mentioned again? I think I missed that one.
The third one is John Speed's on InQtel. I'll post it on the Slack. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we put this in the notes for today's meeting? Because the Slack stuff disappears, well, in just a few minutes. Where's the document?
I can try to corral folks and either maybe we have another discussion topic in this group with all the different parties involved, or we'll do it in the salsa group, but I can take that on.
Okay. But I mean, you know, this group has decided, certainly not me, but I would love it to see, you know, at least one data set, and ideally all these data sets together and maybe eventually merging to have a really good, you know, complete as possible data set for future research.
Cool.
Cool. So it sounds like let me try and drop by the call. If not, we can continue discussion on I'll put in a GitHub issue that we can chime in on as well.
So let me make a quick temperature check, if you don't mind, which is, do people agree that it'd be useful to have a collection of data about supply chain attacks so that, you know, we can do research and trends and all that sort of stuff? Is that,
I had
it
two.
seems like.
I had two comments there. One, it also gives a roadmap for people to try new and exciting things, maybe not so cool. And the second thing is our security response teams for Microsoft and Google right independently, and having them put into this feed might be interesting.
Yeah, at least from at least the CNCF perspective, members have found this useful to kind of, whether it's to better understand what type of attacks there are, and also kind of just to bring back to executives to be like, yeah, this thing is real. Although I feel like with Log4j, that's easy to justify now.
I would say in Checkmarks, we would love to participate in sharing some of the samples we collected. We've developed automation to collect new published versions as soon as they released. So we'll be able to build some sort of copy or adding more to backstabbers or to a private collection for research purposes, to collect IOCs, to study the threat actors. So definitely I would agree this is useful. And we would love to donate and participate in this initiative.
Awesome.
Can you drop a comment in the notes? We don't lose your thoughts.
Yeah, where are the notes? I don't have a link for that, Kim.
Just the meeting notes. They're in the calendar entry. I'll paste them in the chat again.
Excellent, thanks.
Yep. And then quickly, can we move to the last topic? It's naming, our favorite topic in computer science. Michael, are you going to drive this? You picked the perfect name.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, and to be clear, right, like we can put it up for a vote or whatever. I think what we're probably going to do is we're going to remove, we're going to name it from the Secure Software Factory, right? We want to kind of clear any confusion that it's the only sort of thing, and just call it SSF. A lot of folks are already sort of referring it to SSF. We can backronym it with something like, you know, SSF is a software factory or something like that. We just, you know, based on some of the other, you know, there was a lot of good suggestions, but a lot of them were sort of either super focused around Salsa or were already names taken by other pretty popular projects or companies or whatever. And so that's kind of my big suggestion, is just to kind of leave it as just SSF. And so that clears up the confusion that it's like, oh, this is the Secure Software Factory. Nope, it's just SSF. And since people are already sort of referring to it as SSF, we could just sort of leave it as that, unless, you know, there's any big objections.
I have none. You tried. There were complaints, but there's always going to be complaints about a name. You put in a good effort. Go ahead.
I'm looking forward to the logo, though. So share that when it's ready. Cool. I think that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for the discussion.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Kim, can I ask to add to the next meeting agenda a suggestion for a new project?
Yeah. Do you just want to throw it in the doc
Where
there?
should I put it? Yeah,
under the next. Do you see like the next?
Oh, sorry, I wrote it. Okay, cool. Cool, I added it on the bottom.
Yeah, it's helpful if people put their names next to agenda items too, then we know who to track down and confirm and stuff if possible. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.